Hi folks, welcome to this video on the modern Olympics and political exploitation of the modern Olympics. Something that's worth bearing in mind and something that you've got to have very clear. The modern Olympics began in 1896 and it was a French aristocrat, student of history called Baron Pierre de Coubertin, who knew about the ancient games of Greece and then of Rome. But what happened was in the 1800s, mid 1800s, 1860s, 1870s, he came across to England and he saw what the public schools were doing in terms of rationalising sport. Now, I've done a video on public schools and what they did for sport, but essentially, he saw public school boys playing sport, playing hard, but playing fair. So the idea of athleticism, physical endeavour, and moral integrity. He saw them at the end shaking hands with each other. He saw no payments. He saw about amateur ideals, playing for the love of the sport. And when he saw that and used his knowledge of the ancient Olympics in Greece and Rome, he thought, I want to bring the Olympics back. And that's what the early games, beginning in 1896, were all about. They were all about playing hard, playing fair, respect, honour, and amateurism. Okay? Now, that is what the Olympic Games are still about. However, a lot has changed in well over 100 years, and we need to be very, very mindful of that. For example, you now have professionals going to the Olympics, LeBron James in basketball, Serena Williams in tennis, Justin Rose in golf, people like that. So things have changed and things have progressed. Now, what this video is about is 5 particular times that the games have been used for political exploitation. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. The point is this: should we ever bring politics into the Olympics? Or are the two inseparable? That's the kind of thing that we've got to be thinking about. Now, the first one we're going to look at is the 1936 Berlin Olympics. So this is 3 years before the outbreak of World War II, Hitler Nazi Party. So 3 years before World War II starts, Hitler is in charge in Germany, and he wants to promote the Nazi Party and the German people as the most powerful nation on earth. Now, if you win more gold medals than every other nation, that's a long way of selling that. That's a big way of selling that notion. He was very big on something called the Aryan race or the master race. He believed that the best people on the planet were white skin, blue eyes, blonde hair. And as you can see from the opening ceremony, it's all that. And the person carrying the Olympic flame conforms to the Aryan race, the master race. Now, here's the controversial bit, if that wasn't controversial enough about the master race. Remember, the Olympic Games are based on amateurism, and in 1936 they were early years of the Olympics, they were very, very much about amateurism. Hitler made the German athletes train full time, effectively turning them into professionals. Now, this spits in the face of the Olympic Games. Why did he do that? Because he wanted to increase the chance of winning more medals than any other nation. So that's where the controversy comes in. He's trying to use the games to promote his political beliefs, his ideology, the Third Reich ideology, and this idea of the master race. Now, fortunately, history has a way of throwing good people in the mix when bad people are in power. And at this time, Jesse Owens was the #1 athlete on the planet. And there is Jesse Owens, the great Jesse Owens there. An American athlete, a black athlete, brown eyes, brown hair. So the exact opposite of the Aryan/master race that Hitler was trying to push. He won 4 gold medals. He won the 100 meters, 200 meters, long jump, and the 4x100 meter relay. So he really threw this idea of the master race back in Hitler's face, which was absolutely incredible. Now, it's very quick. It's very easy to tar everyone with the same brush and say that all German people were bad. The German long jump champion at the time was a guy called Lux Long, who was, as you can see there, kind of conformed to the Aryan race, the master race, white skin, blonde hair. And I think he had blue eyes as well. He was the German long jump champion and Owens' rival. Long, though, was the first man to congratulate Owens and was even giving Jesse Owens technical advice during the long jump final. So he had deep respect for Jesse Owens, and the two became friends afterwards. Now, as I said, sadly, the Second World War started 3 years after these games, and Lutz Long was killed as a German fighter in the Second World War. But Jesse Owens was still in contact with Lutz Lang's family 30 years after the Olympics, and Jesse Owens ended up being best man for Lutz Lang's son at his wedding, showing the bond that the two had created in terms of those Olympics. So again, the story has a happier ending than the beginning, but it's showing how games can be used and have been used for political exploitation. Now, the second time the games have been used to highlight politics is in 1968, the Mexico City Olympics. Now, this is a bit weird because we're in Mexico, but this is all about South Africa and America, the USA. So at this time in 1968, you have got apartheid in South Africa. Now, for those who don't know what apartheid is, it is total segregation of black and white people in an entire country. But the black people are treated absolutely appallingly. They are not allowed in towns and cities. They don't have access to clean water, electricity, things like that. An absolutely appalling situation. Now, this went on, apartheid, until the early 1990s when Nelson Mandela was ultimately freed from prison and became the first black president of South Africa. However, things are still not great in South Africa, and you still have a lot of racial segregation and a lot of racism. But we'll stick to this narrative here. You've got apartheid in South Africa. As a result, South Africa, the nation, was banned from all major sporting events as it was massively frowned upon, as it should be, as it is now, as it should be now, and hopefully as it is now. So what happens in 1968? You've got two African American athletes, Tommy Smith there, and John Carlos. Now they won gold and bronze in the 200 meter respectively. Now during the national anthem, the US national anthem, when they received their medals, both raised one hand into the sky, and each one had a black leather glove on. Now, they also went out with no shoes on, and they wore black socks. Now, this was called the Black Power Salute, and the fact they're wearing no shoes highlighted black poverty in America. The point was this: there was black and white segregation in America at the same time. It wasn't as extreme as what it was in South Africa, but it was still taking place. So Smith and Carlos were raising their arms to say, you've banned South Africa from these games off the back of black and white segregation. Yet the problem is just as bad in our country, the USA, yet we are allowed to compete. And you see it's absolutely fine for the USA to be here. Now, these two men are heroes. There's no way I am frowning down on what they did. They highlighted a massive social injustice that was taking place at the time. The point of this in the syllabus is, should we be bringing politics into the Olympic Games, or are they impossible to separate? Now, Hitler, you don't want those kind of politics in the Olympics. These kind of politics, I think, are great to have in the Olympics. But the point is, should we have them in the Olympics? And this is why it's part of the syllabus. And this is why it sometimes comes up as a discuss, evaluate, analyse kind of question. Are politics good in the Olympics? Can you give any examples? Are politics bad in the Olympics? Can you give any examples? So on to the next one then, just 4 years later, 1972, we've got Olympic Games in Munich. Now, what happened was a Palestinian terrorist group called the Black September Group took 11 Israeli Olympic team members hostage in the Olympic Village just prior to the start of the Games, to the opening ceremony. Now, my history knowledge is not great, and people will no doubt make comments and say, oh, you're wrong, you've got that wrong. Well, my understanding is this: Palestine, has been a country for many thousands of years. What happened was part of Palestine was annexed off, I think, following the Second World War, and then that was tended to the country Israel, and it was a place where Jewish settlers could go after the horrors of the Second World War. Now, I'm not advocating violence of any sort, and I'm not saying I understand it, but there was obviously going to be quite a bit of resistance to someone chopping off a bit of your country and then calling it something else. So there's always been tension between Palestine and Israel, Palestinian people and Israeli people. So the Black September Group took 11 Israeli Olympic team members hostage, and they demanded the release of 234 Palestinian prisoners who were currently being jailed in Israel. Now, obviously, if you bow down to terrorists, they'll just do it again. So they didn't bow down to terrorists. And German special forces, because the Olympic Games are in Munich, mounted a rescue. Sadly, it didn't go to plan. All 11 Israeli hostages were killed. 5 of the 8 members of the Black September group were killed, and the other 3 were captured. So it wasn't really a happy ending to the rescue. Now, the bit of controversy comes in that the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, made the decision to delay the Olympics for 2 days as a mark of respect, and that then all flags would be flown at half mast for the duration of the Olympics. Now, this was controversial because you've split people 50-50. A lot of people think the games should be stopped, should be halted, should be cancelled because people have been killed in a terrorist act in the Olympic Village, so they should be cancelled altogether. The other half of the people saying no, that is wrong. If the games are cancelled, the terrorists win. They've forced the cancellation of an event that should bring the people of the world together. So it was always going to be controversial, whatever the IOC decided upon. But again, it's an example of politics being brought into the Olympics. So next then, we've got the 1980 Moscow Olympics. Now, obviously Moscow's in Russia, but in this time, Russia was the Soviet Union, a big communist country. So communist is you don't get the right to vote to elect your political leaders. And communism, therefore, is the polar opposite, in many people's eyes, to democracy. So you've got Soviet Union, which is a communist country, they invade Afghanistan in 1979, towards the back end of 1979. The US, one of the biggest democracies in the world, the opposite to the communist Soviet Union, said they would boycott the games unless the Soviets withdrew from Afghanistan. Surprise, surprise, this didn't happen. The Soviets kept in Afghanistan. So the US, along with Canada, West Germany, Argentina, several other countries, boycotted the 1980 games. This map here shows you a map of all the countries that boycotted. If it's coloured in blue, those countries boycotted the games. So you've got North America and Canada. You've got quite a few South American countries. You've got quite a few African countries as well. Here's the Soviet Union. You've got Norway up there as well. You've got a few Asian countries. So quite a few countries did boycott. Now, Britain, the British government, supported the boycott. But they said, we can't tell athletes who've trained all their lives to go to Olympics that you are not allowed to go because of a political motive. So they gave the decision over to the individual sports on whether they wanted to go or not. So British sports that decided to boycott were equestrian, hockey and sailing. But athletes, swimmers, cyclists, rowers, gymnasts, etc., they all decided that they wanted to go. And again, it's going to cause controversy. Should you be telling people that they cannot go to Olympics? They might have political beliefs that are different to you, and you're telling them that they are banned. If you're an athlete in the US or Canada, it doesn't matter what your political beliefs were, you are not going to the 1980 Olympics, and you've trained for them all your life. Is that right? Is that wrong? Again, should politics be getting brought into the Olympics? So finally, then, we've got the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics. Now, here's the thing. You've got 1980 Moscow, Soviet Union, and then the following Olympics, Los Angeles. That was decided even before the 1980 Moscow Olympics and the decision to boycott. So it wasn't a case of, well, we've just had one in the Soviet Union and USA boycotted, we'll now make the next ones in the US. It was already planned years in advance, this. So this is just a quirk of fate that the following Olympics were in the US. So Los Angeles, the Soviet Union, surprise, surprise, and other communist countries such as Cuba decide to boycott these games, as if you wouldn't have guessed that. Now, here's what happened. This is just commonplace now, but at the time, this was revolutionary, this was new, and this was questioned, and it was, a few eyebrows were raised. The USA made the LA Games very, very commercial. They were the first games to become commercial. Now, what does that mean? It meant mass media coverage. It meant adverts in between events. It meant sponsors and sponsorship boards and branding and logos, and it meant merchandise. Now, these 1984 games, were the first Olympics to ever make a profit. Now, most Olympics since then have then gone on to make a profit. So this was like the model on how to do it. However, this was controversial at the time. Remember, Baron Pierre de Coubertin, amateurism, fair play, honour, respect, not money. Money involved in the Olympics at any level can increase the chance of cheating, to try and gain monetary rewards. So this was questioned, should the Olympics ever be commercial? Now the Soviets gave this as their reason for boycotting. You've turned the Olympic Games into a moneymaker. That's not what it was about. That's not why they were brought back in 1896 by Baron Pierre de Coubertin. In reality, and this is probably the case, most saw it as tit for tat. You boycotted ours, we're going to boycott yours. So this Olympics in 1984, the Soviet Union or the other communist countries didn't attend those because they boycotted as well. Again, should politics be getting brought in? Because then you've got a generation of athletes from these countries who were denied their chance to compete at the Olympics. So, politics and sport, the reality is it's governments that bring Olympic Games to countries. So can we ever fully separate politics from sport? I don't think we can. Should we be making more of an effort to do so? Possibly. However, are there instances where the games have been used for a positive manner to highlight politics? If you look at the 1968 Black Power salute, absolutely. So, it's a controversial area. It's one that you've got to know the ins and outs of and have a good background read on. So this was about political exploitation and the modern Olympics. Hope you found it useful, folks.